That was the first 100 meters of its life. And it is, without exaggeration, the single most dangerous journey this animal will ever make. The creature you just watched claw its way out of the sand and race for the water is a sea turtle, and it is about a minute old. It weighs less than a small biscuit. It fits in the palm of your hand, and on this beach tonight in the dark, almost everything that is awake is trying to eat it. But here is the part that should stop you cold, because this tiny thing, no bigger than the top of your thumb, has no mother waiting for it anywhere. It never met her. It never will. She came ashore on this exact beach months ago, in the dead of night, dug a deep hole with her back flippers, laid around 100 eggs, covered them over with sand, and dragged herself back into the sea, and she was gone. From the moment these babies were nothing but soft eggs buried in the warm dark, they have been completely, utterly on their own. And that warm sand did something to those eggs that almost no other creature on Earth lets the weather decide. It chose whether each one would be male or female. A sea turtle's sex isn't fixed when the egg is made. It is set by the temperature of the sand around it as it develops. A little warmer, and the nest fills with females. A little cooler, and it fills with males. The beach itself and the heat of a single summer quietly does the choosing, which means that as the world's beaches slowly warm, the balance is tipping, and more of these nests now hatch out almost entirely female. And getting out of that sand is the first test and the first surprise, because a single hatchling alone could never do it. Buried half a meter down, one tiny turtle would simply exhaust itself and die in the dark. So they don't do it alone. Dozens of them, all crammed into that buried chamber, work together. The ones on top scratch down the ceiling. The ones on the sides pull in the walls. The ones on the bottom trample the loose sand flat. And slowly, over days, the whole nest rises up through the beach like a single living thing. Teamwork is the very first skill this animal ever uses, and it uses it before it has ever once seen the sky. And then, just under the surface, they stop, and they wait. Because to burst out into the heat of the day is to be cooked alive on the open sand and picked off by every gull and crab for miles. So they hold, just beneath the surface, waiting for one single signal for the sand above them to turn cool. Cool sand means the sun has gone down, and the night the cool finally reaches them, the beach erupts. Out they pour, all at once, dozens of them scrambling for the water in a frantic, tumbling wave. And this is the whole grim genius of it. They come out together and they run together, because a hatchling cannot fight and it cannot hide. Its only strategy in the entire world is numbers. Flood the beach with so many babies at the same moment that the predators simply cannot eat them all. Some will be taken so that some get through. That is the plan. That is the only plan there has ever been. And the predators are ready and waiting. Ghost crabs burst out of their burrows and snatch at anything that moves. Night herons and gulls drop silently out of the black sky. Foxes and raccoons patrol the tide line like a picket fence. For a hatchling, that beach is 100 meters of wide-open killing ground, and it has to cross every inch of it on tiny flippers built for swimming, not for walking, hauling itself forward, flipper over flipper, agonizingly slow and completely hopelessly exposed. And how does it even know which way to run? It has never seen the sea. No one points the way, but it is born already knowing one simple ancient rule: go toward the light. For 100 million years, the brightest thing on a wild beach at night has been the open horizon out over the ocean, glowing faintly under the moon and the stars. So the hatchling turns toward the brightness, and it goes, and the brightness is the sea. Except, and this is the modern tragedy hidden inside this story, for the first time in 100 million years, that rule can be a death sentence. Because now there are lights brighter than the horizon, a beachfront hotel, a parking lot, a single glowing porch bulb, and a hatchling will turn its back on the ocean and crawl inland toward a streetlight, and keep crawling until the sun comes up and finishes it. An instinct that kept this animal alive for 100 million years, quietly turned into a trap in a single human lifetime. But say it makes it, say it slips past the crabs, beats the birds, and finally feels that first cold wash of seawater roll over its shell. It is still not safe. It has only traded one set of hunters for another. Because the shallows just off these beaches fill up with fish and small sharks that gather on hatching nights like guests arriving at a feast. So the instant the water lifts it off the sand, the hatchling does something extraordinary. It flips a switch that biologists call the swimming frenzy, and it simply does not stop. For a full day, sometimes longer, it swims flat out, straight away from the land, burning through the last of the yolk still tucked inside its own body, never pausing to rest, never pausing to feed, driven by a single command: get past the shallows, get past the reef, get out into the deep open ocean where at least the hunters are spread thin, and then it vanishes. For years, no one truly knows exactly where a young sea turtle goes. Scientists actually call it the lost years. The hatchling rides the great ocean currents, drifting on floating rafts of seaweed, hiding down among the fronds, eating whatever drifts past, carried thousands of miles around entire ocean basins, a tiny lone traveler adrift in the largest wilderness on the whole planet. And here is the thing that should genuinely stagger you. It does not get lost. This animal, with a brain smaller than a pea, is born carrying a map of the entire ocean written into its body. It can feel the Earth's magnetic field, the invisible lines that run through the whole planet, and it can read both the direction and the strength of that field to know almost exactly where it is and which way it needs to go across thousands of miles of open water with no landmarks at all. It has in effect a satellite navigation system installed before it ever hatched, one it will keep using for the rest of its life. Nobody teaches it. It is simply born already knowing the shape of the sea, and the odds it is up against, they are almost impossible to picture. Of the 100 eggs in that one nest, and the many thousands a single female will lay across her entire life, only about 1 in 1,000 hatchlings will survive to grow up. 1 in 1,000, everything about a sea turtle, the enormous clutches, the mass midnight hatchings, the frantic dash, the lonely years lost at sea, is evolution's blunt answer to that single brutal number. Throw enough of them at the wall, and a precious few will stick. But the few that do stick grow into something almost impossible to believe was ever that helpless scrap on the beach. They become giants, animals that cross entire oceans, dive into the cold and the dark, and live for decades, sometimes longer than the people who stand on the shore and watch them. And then, after 20 or 30 years out in the blue, something calls the females home, and they answer it in the most astonishing way of all. A female turtle will navigate back across thousands of miles of open ocean, using that same magnetic map she was born with, to haul herself out on the exact stretch of beach where she herself once hatched, all those years before, and dig her own nest, and lay her own 100 eggs. The beach that very nearly killed her on her first night alive becomes the one place on the whole of Earth she is compelled to return to, and so it comes around again. 100 babies erupt into the dark. 99 of them will not make it, and one tiny ancient traveler with a map of the ocean folded into its head and not a single soul in the world to help it, will survive the deadliest 100 meters of its life, disappear into the blue for decades, and one day come home, alive, against 1,000 to 1. That is the strange, staggering truth of the sea turtle. It is one of the most defenseless animals ever born, dropped into one of the most dangerous first nights imaginable, with no parent, no teacher, and no second chances at all, and it has survived as a species anyway, exactly the way it has for over 100 million years, by being born in floods, and by carrying inside a brain the size of a pea, a knowledge of the whole ocean that we are only just beginning to understand. So if this story stayed with you, subscribe. There is a new wild survival story here every week. And tell me honestly in the comments, if it all came down to one chance in 1,000, and you had to make it completely alone on the very first night you were alive, do you think you would be the one? Because somewhere out there on a dark beach tonight, one of them is.